So in this video you see me making my flip-top planer stand, which tucks neatly under the workbench, but you can flip it and open it up so that you can use the existing workbench as an outfeed table. So let's get on with the build. So like most projects, mine starts on the miter saw. So for the frame of the stand, I'm going to use 2x3s. So I cut everything into 63 centimeters and then I just butt joined it like this to get a view of how it looks. So the plan is to make half lap joints, and for that I'm going to create this tenon jig. So I took a piece of melamine and then used a Forstner bit to drive in holes the size of which my Irwin quick grips can go in. Then using a jigsaw, I just joined the two holes together. So this is part one of the jig. For the second part of the jig, I used two offcuts of this melamine and created an L-shaped part which fits exactly over the fence. And then I screwed the first part onto this. Then I used a straight piece of timber and used it as a backing plate and screwed it from behind. And now let's see this jig in action. So it's pretty easy with the slots to put your clamps in and hold your workpiece together. So initially I had the blade at half the height, and I found this step unnecessary because it defeats the purpose of repeatability. So I raised the blade to the full height which I need, and I ran all my pieces through it. So once I did this, the next part is to use my miter sled. So using the miter sled, I set the stop exactly where I need the tenons should be, and then I just chop through all the pieces. And then I used a chisel to remove all the small ridges off. Now what you're seeing me do is center punching the two top parts of the stand on which the actual pivot rod will slide in. And that I hogged it off on the drill press. Now it's just quick assembly. It's just glue 3 screw holes everywhere where the holes are pre-drilled, countersunk, and then screwed it in. In the next step, what I did is I kept the planer on top of this 18mm plywood sheet, and then using the holes in which the planer will be held against the actual top, I punched in holes. So these are going to be the place where the planer is going to get bolted down onto the actual frame. So using a 6mm bit on my power drill, I just screwed the holes in. What I'm going to do next is show you a SketchUp animation, and this is going to be something really similar to the one which I did previously for the miter saw flip station. Essentially you got an 18mm top on which you have these 25mm battens. In between the center two battens you got the 25mm pivot rod, which will be sandwiched by another 18mm plywood sheet. Now the two light colored 2x4s which you see over here are uprights on which the planer will sit. The reason why we have this upright is that the bed or the outfeed bed of the planer will then be in the same plane or level as the actual workbench top. And next I cut the pivot rod and the 25mm battens to size. And now it's assembly time for the pivot top. And this is exactly similar to the one which I did for my miter saw station. Next I use these blocks of MDF and they are 25 mm deep. So the idea is wherever you have the screw holes on which the planer is going to get bolted onto the flip top, these MDF pieces will act as cushions, or rather they will fill the space, which means there will be some more meat for the actual planer to be bolted on to the frame. Next I applied some paste wax onto the pivot rod and trimmed off all the 4 edges on the table saw. And now it's assembly time. So for the frames, I pre-drilled a hole from the back and I screwed it onto the bottom piece which you see over here. They're going to be held by bolts, and the risers on the frame is enough that the head of the bolt stays in. To tie everything solidly, I used a couple of washers and a nut. So that's how the frame looks at this point in time. Now to hold this pivot point in place, I'm going to use this conduit couplers as well. So the way how it's going to be fitted will be shown further down the video. And now it's time to attach the flip top onto the frame. So you can see the rod goes into the frame, then you got half of the conduit coupling, it goes to the flip top, then is the other part of the conduit coupling, and then it comes out. It's time to now attach the wheels on it. Now I got these wheels from Amazon, the front to have brakes on it to stop it in place. All the 4 wheels rotate. And rather than screwing it in, I'm going to use bolts again over here to give it that extra bit of rigidity. Now when the planer sits on the flip top, the height of the planer's bed has to be at the same level as that of the workbench. So for that, I'm going to use these 2x4s. As mentioned before, these 2x4s are going to be what's going to give the height on which the plane is going to sit on top of this flip top. Now I measured this to size based on my workbench, and then I pre-drilled the holes using a drill press, and then kept the planer on top of it, and then using this long 200 mm scotch screws, I drove it in. Now these are again going to be held by these square washers and a nut. To add extra rigidity to the frame, I use those 2 spacer blocks which I have, and I'm going to screw them in the back in such a way that the entire frame is now kind of rigid. This will stop the frame from flopping around when you drag the frame up and down the garage. Now to hold the wire neatly in place, I'm going to use these 2 offcuts and we're just going to screw it in. Now using an angle grinder, I grinded off all the excess part of these bolts so that it neatly fits in underneath the bench. I also used an offcut to act as edge banding so that it hides all these different joints. As a next step, to make sure that the rod doesn't rotate along with the flip top, I bolted it through the frame, through the pivot rod onto the bottom so that it stays solidly in place. Now to keep the couplers also in place, I just pre-drilled a small hole and just screwed it in. Now I'm going to use these latches to hold the top horizontal. I had good success with that on my miter saw station, so I see no other reason to use something else. The only thing to do before I attach these latches is to make sure that the actual bed of the plane is on the same level as the workbench. And once it's done, I clamp the whole thing in place and screw the latch in. So now let's see why this was designed in this way. It's not every day that you need the planer, so it makes sense to tuck it further away under your workbench. Now it's top heavy so that when you bring it out and when you flip it, it's at the same level as your workbench. And now let's see the whole thing in action. So that's it guys, thanks for watching again. If you like the video, please give it a like, and I would really like to know what you think about it, so please leave some comments below. So if you're not subscribed here yet, please consider subscribing as well. So see you in the next one.